and nasty show. Short and nasty show. Oh, that short and nasty show. That short and nasty show. Short and nasty little show. Oh, that short and nasty show. Short and nasty show. Oh, short and nasty. So short and nasty, yeah. It's so short and nasty, baby. It's so short and nasty.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is the Short and Nasty Show. My name is Cameron Fielder, and this is my show, my little program here for everyone to tune into. I hope everyone's doing good. I hope everyone had a fun and safe weekend. My weekend was fairly uneventful. Not a lot going on. Today I want to talk about the Spider-Man Disney deal, that whole falling out. Talk about a couple memes that are out there in circulation. A couple hot and spicy memes for you. And the MLB Players Weekend cleats. Now I know a lot of you probably don't watch baseball, and that's completely fine because I'm just going to kind of show you some of the cleats that the players wore, some of the custom signature stylized cleats that the players wore for the MLB Players Weekend. And I wouldn't be showing you these cleats if I didn't think it was a pretty cool thing. And you do not have to be a baseball fan to probably appreciate it. So there's that. But most of the show I'm going to talk about Spider-Man. So let's get into it. I guess I'll save old Spidey, the Disney and Sony deal debacle. Well, I guess I'll save that for the latter part of the program. And that will be mostly what I talk about. But let's start off with these cleats. I think these cleats are pretty cool. So the first cleats I'm going to show you, these are hilarious. So these are, everyone's familiar with the Area 51 meme. The whole idea that a bunch of people are going to go out to Area 51 and Naruto run their way into the facility to find the aliens. Started out as a joke, still a joke, but I think some crazy people out there might actually try to show up. So we got these bad boys, and these were worn by the Pittsburgh Pirates pitcher Trevor Williams, number 34. And there you can see, presumably, Trevor Williams in his Naruto run stance as he runs past an Area 51 sign with the Nevada desert night sky in the background. Really awesome looking cleats. Really awesome. And then you can see on the other cleat, there's the aliens and number 34. Just awesome. Super badass. There's a little cactus, little mesa. These are cool. These are real cool. If I was a rich guy and some of these player cleats were available, I would definitely be purchasing some for myself. So next we'll check out Manny Machado on the San Diego Padres, third baseman for the Padres. Just signed a huge $300 million I think it was like 270 maybe, but around $300 million contract during the offseason. And you see these tie-dye bad boys with the pink. Now I definitely like Trevor Williams Area 51 cleats more than these, but these are pretty cool too. I'm not a huge fan of the baby pink, that soft pink on there. But I do like the blue and the green kind of tie-dye look. Looks like a psychedelic sky, maybe even like a palm tree in there. Very cool looking. I'm a fan. Let's see. Next, I'll show you the smiley face ones. Who's wearing these bad boys? So this was the Boston Red Sox third baseman Rafael Devers, number 11. And, these aren't bad. These are kind of cool, but kind of lacking that character, lacking that color. Just yellow, white, and gray, and a little bit of black on there. And just smiley faces. I don't get it. I do not get it. There are quite a few of these cleats kind of left me scratching my head, even though a bunch of them were pretty badass. Next, we will move on to these bad boys. I like these because I was a Nickelodeon fan as a kid, as I'm sure a lot of you were. These were worn by the New York Yankees shortstop D.D. Gregorius, number 18. And as you can see on the right cleat, he has characters from the Nickelodeon show Doug Funny, his friend Skeeter, I think is his name, and then the dog. And then on the purple cleat, the left cleat, you could see Helga Pataki from Hey Arnold, and presumably there's other Hey Arnold characters on those. Really cool looking cleats. Really cool to see professional athletes, sporting some of the stuff from my childhood and their childhood. Pretty cool stuff. So those are definitely a favorite of mine. Let's check these bad boys out. These are cool looking. I like the gold on the Nike sign. It's kind of like a almost like a orange, rose gold almost. These were worn by Milwaukee Brewers pitcher Junior Guerrera. I think that's or Guerrera, I don't know. Number 41. And these are cool. I like the colors. I'm a big fan of the colors. I'm a big fan of the, they look like they were just doodled on, and I don't know how much of it was him just doodling on them, or if that was kind of part of the design to look like a kid had colored them. But something about it, I like it. I like those flowers he's got on there, all the little notes. I like how the alpha is colored on the sole of the shoe. I really like that. I like it, kind of a retro look. I could see these being worn maybe in the 70s. Very cool looking. Big fan of those bad boys. All right, so the next ones we have are also really cool. These are office cleats. Cleats styled after the show The Office. And they're worn by Derek Holland of the Cubs. He's a relief pitcher, number 45. Let's check these bad boys out. So as you see on the left cleat, we got a nice big shot of Jim Halpert. I like that. And then what's on the front of the shoe? It looks like just maybe office type design on the front, papers with writing on them. I wish I could tell which character is on the back of that left shoe, but I can't. So then we move over to the right shoe, and that character looks like the Looks like that shithead that kept dating Mindy Kaling on the show. I can't remember his name. It's been a long time since I watched the show, but I like the colors. I like the how they have like office papers kind of integrated into the front there, into the toes, and the white and baby blue looks good, looks clean, and I like the kind of stylized cartoon images of the office actors, or the office characters, I guess I should say. So I'm a big fan of these ones. Again, those ones are worn by Derek Holland, relief pitcher of the Cubs. All right, so the next ones we have, these are worn by Mike Freeman, number 6, second baseman on the Cleveland Indians. And these are cool. I like the colors. I think the red and white stripes I could go without. I don't know how well they blend with the baby blue and the pink, but overall I do like the design. Different colored laces from left to right. That's an interesting choice. Looks like on the outside of the shoe there's some sort of mural, maybe flowers or grass or something. It's kind of hard to tell for me at this angle, but it looks cool. I like these cleats. They're not my favorite out of the cleats we've looked at, but I definitely think they have some something to them. There's quite a few cleats that I didn't feel like showing you guys because they were just kind of plain. So it says Pappy, Tuna, man, Skinny, Renegade, the Eagle, I think. No, it's so hard to read some of these. Falcon, Fighter, Rhino, and probably Hollywood. Who knows? So I don't know who all those nicknames are. I don't know if those are his teammates or if they're just dedicated to people that have been in his life. I'm not really sure. Interesting cleats though. Kind of a fan. All right, let's get it moving. Let's get it moving. I got a lot to talk about. All right, I'm going to show you a couple more cleats. Bear with me, guys. These cleats are cool. So these ones are cool. These ones are worn by Victor Robles, the center fielder for the Nationals. And really cool color scheme with the gold. There's like a red in there. All of it's kind of metallic. There's a little bit of green in there. It's all kind of blends together. Really psychedelic look to it. Almost looks kind of Rastafarian in a way, which I really like. And then there's a guy standing right there, number 16. I'm guessing that's Mr. Robles. Yeah. He's number 16, so that's him with standing there with his arms out. Interesting choice. I do think that it would probably look better without that box, that black box, if maybe the cleat had the invert of that. Instead of having that black box on there and then having his silhouette colored in the color of the shoes, I think his silhouette should have just been black. Take that box completely off there and then change the number coloring on the center of them, if you could see it right there, that number 16. Change that number coloring to the coloring of the shoes. I think that would look better. I think this box on here kind of gives it the look of, a kid working with Photoshop, or not Photoshop, but Paint maybe, where they don't understand, like there's a box border around something that they put on there. Just looks cheap and unprofessional, and these shoes look really good, so for that box to be on there, I don't know. I feel like that's a huge design flaw, and someone at Nike should be kicking themselves in the ass for that one. But besides that, it's a great looking shoe, so what a shame. All right, so the last one I'm going to show you is Chris Bryant, number 17, third baseman for the Chicago Cubs, and these are cool. Now, I don't know what this, I don't know if this is like a cartoon or a comic book maybe that I've never heard of, but he's got some sort of little guy on here, maybe a little superhero, and Really cool looking color scheme. Really clean. Some of these are really clean looking. And this manages to have a lot of character. You know, it's got the cartoon, it's got the POW. Looks like there's a hand over here holding something. I'm not really sure what the cartoon is, but it looks clean. The colors are good. They all work together. Doesn't look like a jarbled up mess, just chock full of nonsense. Wings for something, I'm not sure. But regardless of not even knowing what that property is that's represented on there, what it means, these shoes look sweet. These look sweet. And this is another pair. If I was a rich guy, I would definitely own some of these cool looking cleats from the MLB Players Weekend and just have them on a mantle, you know. Now the jerseys and whatnot, I'll just show you a jersey to give you an idea why I didn't really care to make that my focus, is because they're kind of plain, really plain actually. You see, they're just either white on white with like a gray, or they're black on black with like a gray. So not much to talk about there. All right, let's check out a couple memes, and then we'll talk about old Spidey. So this is a meme that's going around, apparently. This guy, and I don't even know if he's being ironic or sarcastic or what. Maybe he's serious, but John McNaughton, at McNaughton Art, it says, "My new painting, the masterpiece. How will history remember this presidency? I believe it will be considered a masterpiece." Now that's why I think that this guy might be trolling. Because even if you're a Republican, you really think it's going to be considered a masterpiece? It sounds like he's being hyperbolic on purpose in the interest of humor. So, but there's his picture, apparently. I hope I'm not being trolled by this. I hope this is an actual painting. And it shows Trump sitting there pulling up the curtain on his supposed masterpiece. This is obviously a analogy. This painting is an analogy for his presidency and how this guy thinks it's going to be a masterpiece. And of course, what do you expect out of the internet? People took this, and which I'm completely fine with, because the original Twitter post and that painting, if that's a real thing, are just ridiculous. Like, you spent all that time painting Donald Trump? What kind of Trump fanatic are you? You know, I don't understand the fanaticism people have over politicians. A masterpiece. What? Jesus Christ, I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. So, here we have Santa Claus CEO replying to that original post, and it's got a little doggy on there. Oh, very funny. That's his presidency. That's the kind of artist he is, so to speak. Staying within the metaphor. And here's one. I'm just going to pull this thing out of here. Here's one. Left my ass off. Amazing. I totally didn't even think of the hands. I don't know what Darth posted, because I'm just looking at this stuff on Dig, so. But there's one McDonald's stuff. Very edgy, bro. Donald Trump, and he's unveiling his masterpiece is a Big Mac with fries. Very edgy. Very clever. This one, I don't know who did it looks like a third grader did this, but it's Mario with some sort of face on him, like a Sonic face, I guess. It's Mario and Sonic, and Sonic's nose is Mario's dick. Interesting. Fantastic. And then this is actually probably the best one, even though these aren't very good, by Matthew Linder, at Linder Matthew, sorry. And he photoshopped Donald Trump's face on Bob Ross, and Bob Ross just painted Kim Jong-un. So, or Kim Jong-il. I think I'm getting them mixed up. He painted the one that's dead. Kim Jong-il, I think. So, there we go. No, it's Kim Jong-un, right? I have never had that problem before of getting those two mixed up. I think it's Kim Jong-il. And then we got this one, the all fucking do it again meme, which is interesting. I think it stems from the fact that this cartoon of Goofy is completely terrifying. I mean, he looks demented, crazy. He looks like a lunatic. So when you add that text, I'll fucking do it again. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And people are using it's not, to me, it's not the funniest. But as far as memes go, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's one of those memes that could be really funny if you post it in the right context. You know what I mean? Nothing really was inherently funny about the Kermit the Frog sipping a martini. You know, nothing was inherently funny about that. But it's funny with the right context when you say something smug and then you post that smug ass Kermit picture. So it's not a terrible meme. I'll fucking do it again, everyone. Why did you make a second Goofy's trial template? Me. The demons told me to. And it's got the second Goofy's trial template. First one was better because the eyes are all fucking crazy, googly. And the art is a little bit, I think his teeth are a little bit more fucked up. And then you look at this one and it's like, well, his teeth are still kind of fucked up, but his eyes are straight, and his mouth, he's kind of smiling instead of having his mouth open. So, all right, and then there's like a big chicken sandwich thing. I guess Popeyes released a chicken sandwich that everyone's just gotta have this chicken sandwich. How good can a fucking chicken sandwich actually be? That's what I really want to know. How good is this goddamn chicken sandwich? Because if it's that good, I'm going to have to run down there. So, a bunch of people were posting about that. This guy, Yart Sensei, posted, the first person that tried Popeye's chicken sandwich was like, and I'll play it for you right now.
I've got to tell someone about this. Hey, all you people, won't you listen to me? I just had a sandwich, no ordinary sandwich, a sandwich filled with jellyfish jelly.
Okay, let's talk about Spider-Man, shall we? Let's talk about Spidey. My little Spidey friend. Now, as everyone knows, Spider-Man, the Tom Holland Spider-Man that has actually become fairly successful over the last 2 Spider-Man movies and 5 total movies, I believe. Old Spidey. He's leaving the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Disney, Marvel, and Sony were not able to make a deal. And pretty predictable, but at the same time it's a bummer. Now, Spider-Man Far From Home was officially the first Sony movie to break $1 billion. So it appears that 5% front-end deal that Disney had is no longer holding weight. The deal was that basically Disney would make 5% on the first dollar gross, meaning that they would make their money right away. From the first dollar made at the box office, they would start getting a 5% cut of that, as opposed to a back-end deal that would be dependent on the studio making their money back first. Now, either way, they would have made a lot of money. It wouldn't be 5% if it was a back-end deal. It would probably be higher. So, and you know a Spider-Man movie is going to make its money back. I mean, that's obvious. So, it's kind of interesting that they went with that deal. I have a theory for why Disney went with such a small, was willing to do such a small deal as far as what they were getting out of it. Because, you know, yeah, they got to use Spider-Man in their movies, and Spider-Man probably boosted Civil War and Infinity War and Endgame and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, you have to wonder, 5% seems awful low. You know, Sony was basically funding Spider-Man movies, and Marvel was basically making them. Marvel's creative team was writing them and making them so that they would stay within the continuity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And to only make 5% on the Spider-Man movies, when you have that heavy of a hand, now you're not funding them, but you could easily. You know, you're Disney, you're worth way more than Sony, and you know you're going to make a lot of money on a Spider-Man movie. I have a theory for why Disney did that. Why Disney was willing to work with Sony for such a small amount. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, it's invaluable to have Spider-Man in your Marvel movies. I don't think so. I think the Marvel movies were doing fine without Spider-Man. I do think Spider-Man boosted things a little bit, but it's not necessary. Those movies were going to be super successful with or without Spider-Man. Now, I have a theory about that, and I'll get to it in a second. So, after Far From Home came out, it's the first Spider-Man movie. It's actually the first Sony movie to break $1 billion at the box office. It seems like both studios kind of got big heads. Disney wanted a bigger cut because they saw the success that Spider-Man's having. And Sony, I'm assuming, felt like, well, you know, we did Into the Spider-Verse ourselves, and that was a success. It won an Oscar. Far From Home just broke $1 billion and has proven Spider-Man's worth a lot of money. We don't need you guys either. So if you're not willing to settle for 5%, first dollar gross, then you can kick rocks. We're going to do our own thing. Now, I think this is a calculated move by Disney. I think agreeing to a deal of only 5% first dollar gross by Disney was a calculated move. I think that they knew that by tying Sony's Spider-Man into their universe, that they would hold the cards come renegotiation time. And what I mean by that is their cinematic universe isn't going to fall apart if you take Spider-Man out of it. You know, it's not going to fall apart. But the Spider-Man movies that they have going right now are set in that cinematic universe. They're set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So to continue making Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland and not acknowledge Iron Man, not acknowledge the other Avengers, any of the Marvel heroes that he's worked with, any of the things that happened in the Marvel movies that Tom Holland's Spider-Man was a part of, Sony basically has to reboot Spider-Man. Now, they're probably not going to recast him, but in a lot of ways, they kind of have to reboot him. You know? Because of the previous two Spider-Man movies and their relation to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I think this was a calculated move on Disney's part. I think Disney knew that Spider-Man's a valuable commodity, but he's not the most valuable commodity. You know, Marvel has a whole roster of heroes, and even if Spider-Man's the most popular out of all those heroes, just the fact that Sony only really has Spider-Man. I mean, they have the villains in the Spider-Man universe, but really, they only have Spider-Man. You know, and Disney has everything else, and that's tough competition. And I think they knew that Sony was gonna either be forced to give them a much bigger deal, or it was going to do severe damage to Sony Pictures and the Spider-Man brand over there at Sony when this deal fell apart. And I'm going to call it right now. I think within the next probably 3 or 4 years, Disney is going to buy Sony. Now, if you look at, I have a little graph here, and you can see Sony's worth. Now, Sony's worth goes way up. It's like at 30. So it's at 30 billion in 2006, and it jumps up to like 60 billion, almost 60 billion in 2007. Jumps up when Spider-Man 3 comes out. Doing pretty good. Takes a huge dive after Spider-Man 3 because Sony doesn't have anything at that point. I mean, what does Sony have? If you think about it, Sony had Adam Sandler movies for a decade. It was nothing but Adam Sandler movies that Sony was pumping out. And you can see that on this chart. So between 2007 and 2008, they just plummet. Or really it's after. It's just right after 2008. Between 2008 and 2010, it plummets, like 2009. Now a lot of people say, well, that's the stock market. Yeah, that's the stock market. It's true. That was the big collapse right there. All right, but you see it build itself up a little, and then it crashes even worse in 2012. Now, we didn't have a stock market crash in 2012. What happened in 2012? More shitty Adam Sandler movies, and The Amazing Spider-Man came out. Now, I can't figure it out, but in 2012, or really 2013 right in there, Sony was only worth $10 billion. It's the lowest they've ever hit on this chart. You know, $10 billion. They were worth nothing. And from there, it steadily just goes up, up, all the way until 2019. And you see they're up there at $80 billion, right? So that Disney deal made them worth some money. $80 billion from $10 billion in the span of 7 years. In the span of 7 years, they've upped their wealth by 8 times. They're worth a pretty penny right now. They had a little drop off right there. It peaked and then it went down and then it went up again. So that's where they're at. They're peaking right now. That's where they're at right now. They're peaking. And a lot of that has to do with Disney. Now, what's going to happen now that they don't have Disney? The Tom Holland Spider-Man universe is in real jeopardy. Well, I predict that chart right there is going to start steadily dropping. And I think within the next couple of years, they're going to be down to maybe, I think their worth is going to be down to probably around 40 billion. Between 35 and 50 billion. I think their wealth is going to drop down there. And when it drops down there somewhere, Disney's going to buy them. That is fully my prediction, that Disney will buy them. A lot of people will be wondering, like, why would Disney buy them just for Spider-Man? Well, Spider-Man is the most popular Marvel franchise. Hands down. And I think they realize. I think the only way that Marvel doesn't buy Sony when Sony's value gets down to about 35 million or 35 billion is that they realize superhero movies are no longer making the money that they were making. And that hasn't happened yet. I mean, they continued to. Avengers Endgame made the most by far out of any superhero movie ever. I'm fairly certain. I think it made over $2 billion. So we haven't seen that drop off yet, but it's going to happen. You know, there was a time when a Lone Ranger movie would be the biggest thing in America as far as audience anticipation. You know, there was a time when that was the thing. And shit, you make a Lone Ranger movie now, no one cares about that. No one wants to see the Lone Ranger. You know, things come and go. Things fall out of fashion and come back into fashion. And superheroes have about run their course, you know. And a lot of it's going to depend on whether Sony or Marvel realizes that first. If Sony realizes that before Marvel realizes that, before Disney realizes that, they'll probably be eager to sell Spider-Man. Maybe sell their whole studio. I do think if Sony realizes superhero movies are falling out of fashion, I think Sony is going to sell. Either sell Spider-Man or sell their entire company. I honestly can't see him just selling Spider-Man. I think if anything they would force Disney to buy all of Sony, because what else does Sony have? You know, like what, Sonic the Hedgehog or so? I mean, Sony doesn't have anything. So besides Spider-Man, as far as properties go. So but I do think Disney's going to end up buying them. I think that that Sony's going to struggle now that they don't have Tom Holland's Spider-Man in that universe. They're still going to have Tom Holland, but I don't think their movies are going to do as good. I think Disney's probably going to do everything they can to get in their way, and I think fans are going to be more pissed off at Sony than Disney at the end of the day. When they see that 5% number and they hear that Sony wasn't even willing to give 30% of what the movies were making, I think 50%'s a little crazy. I think that's what Disney was trying to get, 50% of the entire gross. And I think that's too much. I think 50%'s way too much. But 25, 30%, you know, I think that's doable. I think Sony has to realize at a certain point who they're messing with and what kind of disadvantage they're at, simply because of leverage and power, simply because Disney holds all the cards. You want to be a part of Disney's universe. It's not the other way around. You see how that works? And in a way, by agreeing to such a tiny deal initially, Disney was genius, because they put you in a position where now you've made a couple movies with them. Now people expect you to keep working with Disney and Marvel's Cinematic Universe. Now people expect that, and they're severely disappointed, and for the most part they're blaming Sony. So there we are. I think that eventually Disney will buy Sony. Give it at most 5 years, and I think Disney will own Sony. Disney's buying everything up like crazy. If you look at the movies, Far From Home was technically the first Spider-Man movie to break $1 billion. It was actually the first Sony movie to break $1 billion. Obviously, that is the last Spider-Man movie to come out. It's a Spider-Man movie that takes place within the Marvel Cinematic Universe and was creatively made by Disney and Marvel Studios. So I can see why Disney would kind of say, hey, man, you know, you've never had this kind of success before, although they have, in a way, and I'll get to that, but you've never had this kind of success before. It's all because of us. You know, we deserve more than 5%. Now, do they deserve 50? I don't think so. I think they should have came to terms at about 25 or 30%. I think would have been fair for both sides. So if you see here, it's $1.1 billion for Far From Home. Now, if you take Spider-Man 1, which came out in 2002, and adjust that bad boy for inflation, $822 million, adjusted for inflation, comes out to $1.167 billion. Right? So that's already more. When you adjust for inflation, that's more than Far From Home. So maybe Sony's onto something. Maybe Sony realizes, hey, you know, we have the potential to make money on our own. If you look at Spider-Man 2, the second of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, during the golden age of Spider-Man, as I like to call it, that made $782 million. And if you adjust for inflation, you get $1.055 billion. Both of those movies, adjusted for inflation, would have made over $1 billion. This big claim that, Disney's Far From Home, the first Sony or Spider-Man movie to breach $1 billion, that's technically true. It's also disingenuous, though, because adjusted for inflation, it's not even the most successful. Now, Spider-Man 3, that made, adjusted for inflation, $1.103 billion. So that made just as much as Far From Home. All three of them broke over $1 billion when you adjust for inflation. Now here's where Sony started to hit their low. And here's what Disney's banking on. That Sony will fall back into this pattern of The Amazing Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man, the first one, came out in 2012. It made $757 million. And if you adjust that for inflation, I mean, 2012 wasn't that long ago. That only brings it up to $847 million. Not a lot. Amazing Spider-Man 2, that made $709 million. Even worse, when you adjust it for inflation, it's not going up that much, $765 million. So those movies did abysmal. Those movies made less than any other Spider-Man movie has ever made. Not even adjusting for inflation, right? So they did terribly. Now Disney's banking on the fact that Sony's going to hit that low again. Part of the reason why the Golden Age Spider-Man movies were so successful, and Disney knows this and Sony should know this, is because there wasn't a plethora of superhero movies to compete with at that time. In fact, at that time, it was just X-Men. I don't think Fantastic Four had come out yet. So it was just X-Men, and Superman wasn't really a thing. I mean, they hadn't made a Superman movie in forever. I mean, you know, that was the dawn of the superhero mega blockbuster age, really. Yeah, there'd been Superman and plenty of Batman movies. You know, X-Men had come out before. I think X-Men, the first X-Men came out before first Spider-Man. I think it had it beat by like a year. You know, so I fully understand that at that time, Spider-Man kind of had an open field. You know, if you were at all into comic books or even just I was never really that into comic books, but there was a great Spider-Man cartoon on Fox Kids when I was a kid that I watched every day. So by the time, I think I was like maybe in 8th grade when the first Spider-Man movie came out. When that movie came out, I was stoked, you know. And in a lot of ways, I think people are kind of tired of superhero movies, or they're at least getting to that point. At that time, it was a new thing to watch Spider-Man swinging from building to building. I mean, there was a ton of novelty in watching that. You know, that kind of CGI work, I don't think had been seen up to that point. I know a lot of the stuff was like practical, green screen, cheeseball, and it hasn't aged that well, but that was a great movie at the time, and groundbreaking in a lot of ways, just like the first X-Men movie, you know. But going forward, I don't see Sony having the kind of success that they had during the golden era, and I don't even see them having the kind of success that they had with Tom Holland, because that situation also had a lot of novelty packed into it. You know, just the fact that you got to see Spider-Man interacting with these other established superheroes. That in itself was really cool and really novel. You know, a lot of this stuff, having superhero team-ups had never really been done before Marvel. And just that in itself put butts in the seats. But as time goes on and as they've milked each of these franchises for what it's worth, it just gets to a point that the novelty wears off and people start to become hungry for something new, you know, for a new genre, you know, maybe what's going to become big again, maybe, I don't know, action adventures, like actual adventures, you know, movies like Tomb Raider and The Mummy and Indiana Jones. You know, is that going to become a big thing, or are Western movies going to become big again? You know, who knows what the future holds? It might be sci-fi for the next 15 or 20 years that kind of dominates that marketplace. But we're getting to a point where superhero fatigue is a real thing. And it's going to come down to whether Disney or Sony realizes that first. If Sony realizes that first, I think Disney will end up buying Sony. If Disney realizes that first, then I think Sony's going to be fucked. And maybe Disney will still buy them later on down the road, but it's going to be for barely anything. And that's just my 2 cents. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that. A lot of people are probably going to say I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But that's my prediction. If it happens, and you remember this, you can come back here and say that the old boy was right. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for listening or watching. Please like and subscribe. I appreciate all of you. And leave a comment down below. Thanks.